Hey, Jeff Nelson of VetSource here today. I want to talk about a disturbing book that I just read. It's called The Illusion of Evidence-Based Medicine, Exposing the Crisis of Credibility in Clinical Research. It's written by two eminent professors, John Giardini and Leeman McHenry. And what they reveal about the pharmaceutical industry and medical research will probably shock you, even if you're already skeptical about big pharma. We want to believe that medical science is pure. We want to trust that researchers seek the truth, that studies are honest, and drug companies want to help people. But what these authors found when they dug into internal corporate documents is absolutely frightening. Let me give you some examples of what they discovered. This is the book right here, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Now, the authors, they were hired as expert witnesses in a series of high-profile lawsuits against drug companies. And through discovery in these cases, they accessed internal documents. These are documents that were never meant to be seen outside the company. And what they found was systematic deception on a massive scale. First, they discovered that many scientific papers weren't actually written by the prestigious doctors whose names were on them. Instead, drug companies hired ghostwriters to create papers with predetermined conclusions. After their employees wrote these papers, they then paid academic researchers to put their names on them. And we're not talking about small-time researchers. These were often the biggest names in medicine. Their opinions shaped treatment guidelines used by doctors worldwide. These doctors agreed to pretend they had done this research when they'd had nothing to do with it. But it gets worse. Let me take you through some of the specific cases they discuss, and you'll see just how deep this deception goes. I'll start with Paxil. This was GlaxoSmithKline's blockbuster antidepressant, bringing in over $11 billion in sales, and they wanted to reach depressed teenagers, a huge potential market. And GSK ran what became known as Study 329 to test Paxil in adolescents. Now, here's where it gets really disturbing. GSK's research found that the drug was no better than a placebo, a sugar pill, in treating teen depression. Even worse, it actually increased suicidal thoughts in these kids. But instead of reporting this, they manipulated the data to claim it was both safe and effective. They hired ghostwriters to write papers claiming success. Then they paid prominent psychiatrists to put their names on these papers. The company paid a $3 billion fine, but consider this. How many families put their depressed teens on this medication hoping to help them, only to make things worse? The damage done with this drug is just incalculable. Then there's Celexa, another antidepressant is made by Forest Laboratories. The same story here. The company trials showed it didn't help kids, but they spun the data to show success. Forest went even further. They paid doctors to prescribe Celexa and its successor, Lexapro. We're talking about lavish dinners and paid vacations disguised as consulting fees. Now, all of this to promote drugs that they knew weren't effective for these young patients. Forest Labs paid $313 million in settlements. Another was about a drug called Neurotin. This was Pfizer's epilepsy drug, but they had much bigger plans for it. Pfizer launched what the authors called a snake oil marketing campaign. That's their words, not mine. To promote Neurotin, they pushed for everything from bipolar disorder to migraines to chronic pain. These were not approved uses for Neurotin. In fact, Pfizer had no reliable evidence, zero, that it worked for any of these conditions, but they paid doctors to prescribe it anyway. They hired ghostwriters to create fake research supporting these uses. The drug sales soared from $98 million a year to nearly $3 billion a year due to this deceptive marketing. Pfizer eventually paid $430 million in fines, but that was just a fraction of their profits. Maybe the most devastating case they write about was Merck's anti-inflammatory drug Vioxx. Probably have heard about that. This one really shows how profit can override public safety. Vioxx was marketed as a safer alternative to traditional painkillers for arthritis patients. It was a massive success, reaching $2.5 billion in annual sales. But the tragic part, internal emails revealed that Merck knew very early on that Vioxx raised the risk of heart attacks and strokes. Instead of warning doctors and patients, they worked to conceal these risks. They even made a hit list of doctors who criticized Vioxx. They called it a hit list. That's their words, not mine. They crafted a plan in their emails of how to neutralize and discredit doctors that were critical. And by the time Vioxx was pulled from the market, it had been linked to an estimated 60,000 deaths from heart attacks and strokes. The true number may be much higher. Merck ended up paying $4.85 billion in settlements, But think about the number of not lives, 60,000 lives. That's more than the number of Americans who died in the Vietnam War. So these cases, they're frightening. They show the system's total corruption. The drug companies haven't just influenced studies, they've reshaped our entire medical knowledge. And we're talking about payments to researchers to put their names on ghost-written papers, payments to doctors to prescribe their drugs, payments to medical journals to publish their studies, payments to peer reviewers to approve the papers, payments to professional medical associations to create guidelines recommending their drugs. And here's something that might surprise you. When drug companies get caught and they pay these massive fines, that's just a cost of doing business. They're okay with that. The profits they make from these deceptive practices far outweigh any penalties. So there's no incentive for these companies to change anything. And these are just the drugs they make when they have liability and they can be sued. With no liability, like for vaccines, for example, there's no downside to committing fraud. There will be no lawsuits to force companies to reveal their fraudulent data or their emails and all that kind of thing that we see in these other cases. So what is the takeaway here? Well, first, we need to be skeptical, very skeptical of drug company claims. When you see a new drug being heavily promoted, remember these cases. The nonprofit organization Public Citizen, they have a 7-year rule on new drugs. Don't take any new drugs until it's been on the market for at least 7 years. That's usually how long it takes to discover a drug's dangers and its research, and that its research may have been fraudulent. Second, we need major reform in how medical research is conducted and published. In the book here, the authors, they suggest several solutions, including complete transparency in clinical trial data. That would be nice if anyone could have access to that. Independent funding for medical research. Impose strict penalties for research fraud. Jail drug company executives for it. Don't just fine them. And better protection for whistleblowers. They argue that some cases succeeded because insiders cooperated and revealed what had actually happened. So protecting and rewarding whistleblowers who reveal fraud is in the public interest. Finally, we got to remember that despite many good people in medicine and research, money has corrupted the system almost entirely. As the saying goes, it's hard to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. That's why I try to be medicine-free as much as possible. I want to take responsibility for my health. I try to use diet and lifestyle to prevent problems. Anyhow, this book is a vital expose. It reveals Big Pharma's manipulation of medical science. We owe a tremendous debt to investigators like Professors Juriendi and McHenry. They've used their expertise to dig through internal documents. They connected the dots, and they showed us how drug companies put profits over lives. Their work reminds us that the price of public safety is eternal vigilance. And while the picture these professors paint is disturbing, knowing the truth is the first step towards fixing the system. If you want to learn more, I highly recommend getting their book. I'm going to put a link to it down in the description below. If you found this video helpful, please hit like and subscribe, and go to subscribe to my Substack, which I'm also going to link below. It's free. And let me know in the comments if you've had any experiences with medications that turned out to be less effective or more dangerous than claimed. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.